Thank you, Amy. We're so excited about what you're doing in Sun Valley, so that's great too. But also so excited about this final session for today. Please, as they come up, please join me in welcoming two Assistant Secretaries in the Department of Defense from the Navy, Dennis McGinn, and from the Air Force, Miranda Ballen. So it's not without some significance that we've had the Department of Defense here. You play such a huge role, not just in Hawaii, but in the whole, what's called, is it PACOM? Is that how you say it? Or is it PACOM, the Pacific Theater? But it's quite interesting footprint that you have from an energy perspective. Secretary McGinn, why don't you start and give us a little bit of a profile of what that's like?
Well, for all of the services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, our energy efforts, our environmental efforts are all about mission. It is all about increasing mission effectiveness by using less energy, but to get the same or better outcomes. It's all about operational efficiency, and we measure it, our success, not in gallons or barrels saved or megawatts saved or what have you. That's certainly interesting in the money that implies, but it's can we do the mission better? Can our installations across the Department of Defense be more secure and have more reliable energy security? And that is where we come from, and we all of the services have really made some great progress, but we've only just begun. We're really going to accelerate this as technology, new business models, new partnerships come online, especially here in the Pacific.
So let's talk about the footprint, because it's quite extraordinary. Just give us a little sketch of that, and then, and is this from the DoD perspective?
Sure. The Department of Defense in aggregate uses about 2% of the total energy that the United States uses. That makes us the largest single organization in terms of energy consumption. So there's a lot that we can do to lower that if it is good for our mission effectiveness and our operational efficiency. The services all have different parts of that 2% pie, if you will. Some of it is driven by ship fuel. Much of it is driven by aircraft fuel. I'm sure that Secretary Ballen will talk about that. But we all have in place very, very good metrics. And the good news is our overall consumption continues to come down over time, and the mix of where that energy comes from, whether it's transportation fuel or transportation energy or installation energy, the portfolio is getting much more diversified and much less carbon intense, much less dependent on fossil fuel.
And at the same time, the whole threat environment that the military operates in has shifted. So you're looking at doing all of these operational, all the logistics, everything that you do in a very different environment. Talk a little bit about that and how the energy picture changes as a result.
So, Joel, I'm going to actually answer your first question as well for the Air Force, if you don't mind, real quick.
Fine. Oh, of course.
And I'd also like to get a sense of folks in the room. How many folks, if you wouldn't mind raising your hands, are currently active duty, Guard, Reserve, or civilian working for the Air Force? Not many. Keep your hands raised, because I want to see cumulative.
Your aide just raised his
my military
hand.
exec just raised his hand. And how many are retired or veterans from the Air Force? Okay, a few more. Now let's add in Navy, Marines, Army, active Guard, Reserve, civilian, current, or retired. Okay, so still not a huge portion of our audience. So
that was a traffic guard. Does that count for anything?
It does.
Okay,
it does.
good.
You're keeping people safe. So just to give you a little bit of sense of the Air Force's piece of the DoD portfolio, your Air Force flew 815,000 sorties last year. Now that probably doesn't mean much to those of you that don't know what a sortie is. But if you add all that up, in 1 year, your Air Force flew the cumulative of 250 years worth of flights in 1 year. Now, about 27,000 of those were what we call remotely piloted aircraft, and that's essentially where we've taken the pilot out of the airplane and put him or her into a cockpit on the ground. So there's still a pilot, they're just separated from the actual aircraft. So electrons are to a remotely piloted aircraft as jet fuel is to an F-35 or an F-16. So when we think about energy resiliency, we're thinking about not just the resiliency of jet fuel, but the resiliency of electrons, because more and more, the Air Force in particular, is running our missions from our bases, sometimes very, very far away from where the actual aircraft is. Now, to give you a sense of size and scale, so I most recently came from the US's largest private energy consumer, which is a small retail company called Walmart that some of you probably know. And the Air Force spends about $9 billion a year on energy. $9 billion. That's your dollars, for those of you that are Americans, because it's taxpayer dollars. About 80% of that is jet fuel. So we have about 5,000 aircraft. That's more than if you add up United, American, Southwest, Delta, UPS, FedEx, add them all up combined, we've got more aircraft.
What was the revenue of Walmart last you checked?
About 500 billion.
Oh, 500, okay.
Yeah, about 500 billion, so it's a big company. But there is a good comparison. The Air Force alone, and this is just the Air Force piece of it, the Air Force alone has about 615 million square feet of building space, about 40,000 facilities, 615 million square feet. So if you added up every Walmart, Sam's Club, neighborhood market in the US, it's about 600,000 square feet. So pretty similar. So pretty big size and scale.
So we get this.
I never got to your threat
No,
question.
we'll get to that. There's a big scale.
Yep.
And, but how has, let's talk about that, how that mission has changed from an energy perspective. You talked a little bit about that you now have UAVs or drones that are electrified and where you're replacing jet fuel. What other parts of the mission, as it's changed in this modern military, has that affected the energy footprint?
Well, let's talk for just a minute about facility energy more than jet fuel, because that's a different conversation.
Sure.
So if you're talking about our installations, the threat environment really has changed quite dramatically, I'd say, in the last 5 to 10 years. So over the course of the last couple of decades, the military has actually been shutting down most of the power plants on base and transitioning to the commercial power grid for both reliability and cost reasons. And what we're finding in the last, I'd say, 5 years is the threat environment to the utility grids, which we've been talking about some today, has changed pretty dramatically. In just the last 5 years, DHS tells us that there's been a 7-fold increase in cyber attacks to the utility grid. Actually, not just the utility grid, all of our public infrastructure. And we've seen a significant increase in physical attacks against the grid. Mm-hmm. So no longer are we just talking about outages due to storms and weather events, which are also increasing, by the way. We're also talking about physical and cyber risk.
Yeah, the grid was built for just in time, but not so much for just in case, which is,
right.
I think, yeah.
So one of the ways that you make yourself more resilient is to do more distributed generation. And we're deploying for our shore infrastructure, we're having various stages of procurement, 1.2 gigawatts of renewable energy. Some of it is power purchase agreements, some of it is enhanced use lease, where we put solar farms, for example, on a military base for export to the regional grid, all the customers of the utility. The advantage of this is that you have less long lines, if you will, of transmission. You have the ability to do microgrids, especially as the cost of storage comes down, and you can stretch out that solar day. And the closer you put generation, solar, wind, what have you, to the load source, the more secure you are over time. The other thing on the operational side, this is a metric. I mentioned we don't count necessarily for the imperative of why we're doing this energy transformation. The metric is, if I'm a ship captain, I want to be able to go and sit in a launch window, launch box out on the ocean for launching Tomahawks against ISIS, for example, or North Korea. If I'm a F-18 pilot and I'm providing close air support for Marines or soldiers on the ground, I want to be able to stay in that location longer without having to leave to go hit the tanker again, or in the case of the ship, the underway replenishment oiler. So by incorporating energy conservation measures, how you align your engineering plant, how you fly your airplane, the flight profiles, we're actually getting a return on investment in terms of more mission presence. We can go further, carry more, and stay there longer. Same is true for our Marine Corps. Going to a forward operating base, you want to bring as much renewable energy and as much energy conservation technology as you can, because that reduces your reliance on diesel fuel for your diesel generator sets, and you don't have to take Marines and put them on guard convoys, if you will, for fuel convoys, which are the most deadly mission proven in time and time again in Iraq and Afghanistan.
I want to bring the conversation here to the islands, because I know both the Air Force and the Navy have a lot going on the islands, particularly on Oahu, I think. And I'd love to hear a little bit about that, but I'd like to get it in the context of what you've learned and how you see your missions here in Hawaii connecting with the state's new mandate to build out a 100% renewable energy system. Secretary Ballen, you want to start?
Sure. Well, the Air Force has been working here in the state in Hawaii on energy innovation for quite a long time. We've recently sort of stepped up our game a little bit at the 154th, which is the Air National Guard Wing here at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, where we had already done a number of interesting, innovative tests. So we had already designed a solar array that can create hydrogen. We've transformed a number of our tactical vehicles into hydrogen-powered tactical vehicles, including weapons loaders, which is pretty fun, as well as non-tactical vehicles. And significant energy efficiency, really pushing the envelope on that type of thing. We are now taking that the next step in integrating a range of other technologies into a test bed site, which will ultimately be a microgrid of microgrids. So there will be 5 microgrids across the campus tied together in one microgrid system. We're still in the design phase of this. I'm particularly excited about a 10-ton per day waste-to-energy plant that we're experimenting with. We've been looking at waste-to-energy across DoD for quite some time, in part for our stateside bases, but in large part for our forward operating bases, where we've got a couple of challenges with waste and energy. So if we can solve both of those in one technology, that's great.
Can you explain why you have a microgrid of microgrids? Why do you tie them together as opposed to having islanded microgrids so you can study each of them individually? What happens by tying them together?
Well, I think you gain flexibility. In this particular site, we're going to be testing different technologies over time. So this location is a good test bed location for us. There are a number of things that make Hawaii a good place to do this type of work. Very strong support from the state, good regulatory environments, but also, frankly, high cost of power. When you're paying 25, 35, 45 cents a kilowatt hour, a lot of projects that aren't in the money when you're paying 7 or even 4 cents a kilowatt hour, like we do in some places back in the continental United States, a lot more projects can make it into money.
Secretary McGinn, talk a little bit about what the Navy's doing here.
Sure. We are deploying a lot of renewable energy. We have a 20 megawatt solar array that's going to go in the west lock of Pearl Harbor. We have already 17 megawatts in various locations, from Camp Smith, the PACOM headquarters, out to the Marine Corps base at Kaneohe Bay, at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam. And additionally, we are continuing to drive down total energy density or intensity by energy conservation measures. And let me say this, that one of the most satisfying things, I think, across all of our services, technology is great. We talk about PV, we talk about microgrids, we talk about wind, we talk about battery storage. And that's good, it's a good start. But you need two other things, and one of them is partnerships. Partnerships like we announced this morning with Governor Ige for the Memorandum of Understanding with the state of Hawaii. The other thing that's even more powerful is culture. And the culture of energy awareness, energy conservation, the direct ties between what an individual airman, sailor, marine, or soldier does in garrison or out in the field or at sea or in port in the case of sailors is directly related to mission success. And that culture has changed very, very rapidly from the heads of service, the chiefs of staff, the CNO, on down to the seamen and lance corporals.
So what have you learned about that culture in terms of how do you infuse that with the kinds of knowledge around and engagement, whether it's around efficiency or around renewables or just energy in general? What have you learned, either of you?
I would say primarily you get to change the culture with education and demonstration of success. You can't just say, all right, everybody turn off the lights, don't stay in the shower for days, on and on and on. That is helpful, but when you show a direct correlation through examples on the base and how it can improve quality of life, how it can improve mission effectiveness, that really does it. Probably the most dramatic example, though, comes from our Marine Corps, where when we deployed India Company 3-5 Marines over to Sangin in southern Afghanistan in early 2011, they were sent with some solar panels and flexible solar panels for patrols and some LED lights and other energy-saving devices to use in their forward operating bases. The direction from the commandant at the time, Jim Conway, was, hey, look, if you guys find this useful, great. Go ahead and use it. If you don't, throw it in the Helmand River and just continue. Well, they did find it useful to the extent that it cut down the diesel generator loads at forward operating bases by 60%, taking less Marines off to do convoy escort and be exposed to IEDs and RPGs, left more Marines at the forward operating base to take the fight to the Taliban. And one of these forward operating bases came under attack. Rocket-propelled grenades. After it was over, the Marines prevailed, and they found that some of the solar panels had fragmentation damage from the rocket-propelled grenade shrapnel. The lights never went off because, unlike a diesel generator set getting hit by a rocket-propelled grenade, which would have blown up and probably killed or injured Marines, the solar panels took a licking and kept on ticking. And I like to tell this story because if it's good enough for the United States Marine Corps at a forward operating base in Afghanistan, what is wrong with the rest of us Americans? We got to get out there and deploy it.
By the way, for those of you under 55, that was a Timex commercial reference. The Timex made watches. That's something that Apple now makes. You may have heard of them.
It's in a John Prine song, too. She takes a look and keeps on ticking.
Okay, that's a different story, but let's not go there. So what are you seeing working in the Air Force in terms of how you're engaged? Is there anything magic that's different than in the civilian world? Because you did this at Walmart as well. You were trying to get hundreds of thousands of associates marching in the same direction.
2.2 million, as a matter of fact.
2.2 million. Okay.
I'm going to actually steal an example from one of my old bosses, Lee Scott at Walmart, who said, there's three kinds of employees. There are, and we call them the 3 A's. He called them the 3 A's, and I think it's applicable no matter where you work, whether you're talking about employees or suppliers or whatever. So the first are the active. These are the folks that have come back. You talk to any soldier or Marine who has protected a fuel convoy or driven a fuel truck, or you talk to any fighter pilot or any pilot who has flown on empty, and they pretty much all have, and many of them are really engaged. And as soon as you start talking about energy resiliency, energy vulnerability, our adversaries' targeting of our energy, they get really excited and passionate. So for the active folks, really all you have to do is give them the top cover to go be productive and help orient them the right way with the right policies. The second kind of group is called agnostic. These are the folks that so goes this chief of the Air Force, so goes this secretary of the Air Force, so goes this president, so goes I. And they kind of follow, and if the next chief or secretary goes in a different direction, I go that direction too. Those folks, you need to keep going in the right direction. The third category are the annoyed. And we all know who the annoyed are. Now, generally, in my experience, for most of the folks that are in the annoyed category, you just don't have to worry about them. But if you have folks in the annoyed category at key levels in organizations, so in the private sector, that's often at the VP, SVP, and EVP level. In the military, that's often at the 2-star, 3-star level. These are the folks that take strategy, take resources, and turn them into action plans. And if you have annoyed at that level, you have a problem.
So do you just focus on the active and hope that some of the agnostics come along for the ride, or where do you focus your energy?
So, I think in these conversations, we often talk too much about technology, policy, and finance. Right. And gosh, if we just get technology, policy, and finance aligned, it's all gonna work.
It's the culture.
And we all know, many of the folks in the room know that we have technologies today sitting in catalogs that make perfect financial sense, that need no policy intervention, that nobody's buying. Right. Some folks call it culture. I call it inertia. There is incredible inertia behind existing ways of doing business, behind existing relationships between buyers and their suppliers, existing relationships between buyers and technologies. And a body in motion stays in motion, right? So it's all about changing the inertia and changing the momentum, the mass and velocity. So that gets to be some pretty boring stuff, Joel. Not that exciting to sit up and talk about organizational structures and policy documents and PDs in our world and AFIs in our world. These are all sort of policy documents, but those are the fundamental critical components to create the inertia in a certain direction that you want it to go.
We have a great deal of inertia going on right now in the South China Sea with the John C. Stennis battle group and the USS Abraham Lincoln, and out there doing freedom of navigation and operations with the Indian Navy, with other navies of that littoral. In about 3 weeks' time, that John C. Stennis strike group, with all of its cruisers and destroyers and submarines, are going to be coming back here to the Hawaiian operating area as part of the Rim of the Pacific exercise. It is the main part of what we're calling the Great Green Fleet. We sent them out from San Diego in January for the first time on a regular deployment with a biofuel blend, petroleum and biofuel. And they're going to be getting biofuel here as well. Importantly, among the 27 ships from different navies, partner and allied navies, we will be passing some of that fuel to them because we've educated them, we've demonstrated that it's the moral equivalent of petroleum, if you will, in terms of the molecules and what it does to power our ships. And that is the kind of a cultural experience that brings people a lot of confidence and gets that inertia turning in the better direction.
Well, speaking of keep on ticking, we've got a little bit of time. Let's see if we can get in one question from Lauren.
Yeah, we just got an interesting question about how both the Navy and the Air Force are building in-house renewable energy expertise. So what sorts of skill sets, maybe in the civilian realm, are each of you hiring for related to energy, climate, sustainability, all of this?
Secretary Ballen?
Well, I would say that we've all been doing renewable energy for quite a long time, actually. The Air Force has only just recently set up an organization called the Office of Energy Assurance, which is focused on base renewable energy projects that contribute to energy resiliency. That organization is modeled very much after the Army's Office of Energy Initiatives, and will be building on the Navy's Renewable Energy Program Office. So each one of us have specific offices designed to bring in this expertise, leverage knowledge from one another, and get these projects done.
We also rely a lot on the private sector, whether they're new technology companies. You'll be hearing a lot from Don Lippert from the Energy Accelerator based here in Hawaii, bringing in new companies in an incubator mode to bring new technology for energy efficiency and renewable energy. We also go from that size of company all the way up to huge utilities, including Hawaii Electric Company, HECO right here, and then on the mainland, all of our utility providers from Duke, Dominion, Virginia, Southern California, Edison, PG&E, across the board. And we learn a lot about what they are doing in a partnership mode. They learn a lot about what we need, and we're moving down the road.
We're almost out of time, but really quickly, what's on your wish list? We've got a lot of entrepreneurs in here in the room, many, many more watching the live stream. What do you need?
I'll tell you what's on my wish list is an off-the-shelf, microgrid, highly flexible product. That just doesn't exist today. The way that solar PPAs didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago, which is pretty much off-the-shelf plug and play today, that would be my wish list.
Plug and play microgrid. Secretary?
3, battery technology, or storage technology, I should say, and it doesn't have to be batteries, it could be thermal. Power electronics to manage load and power supply on microgrid. But the most important thing we need is enthusiasm to overcome inertia. This is a great time to be in the energy business, to be in the sustainability business. The technology is great. The partnerships are wonderful, especially here in Hawaii and in the Asia-Pacific region. And just keep your enthusiasm up, and we're going to advance some, we're going to retreat some, but the overall arc is forward, and it's we're really going to be truly in a clean energy economy, a clean energy society in the United States and globally.
Well, I love your enthusiasm. I love your enthusiasm, and apparently so do a lot of other people. So thank you for that, for showing the way, for pushing the envelope in every sense that the Air Force and the Navy and the Department of Defense do that, but really helping us see what resilience looks like, what security really means beyond the things we read about in the paper, and the implications for all of us here. So really can't thank you enough for all that you're doing. Thank you, and please join me in thanking Secretary Ballen and
Thanks a lot.
McGinn. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.